Welcome to this episode of the Carlyle podcast. The following is a conversation with legendary sports broadcaster Elton Welsby. It's an Everton-heavy conversation discussing an array of subjects, including Everton's start to the 25-26 season, the impact of Jack Grealish under David Moyes, and given the news of Jordan Pickford's new 4-year contract, we compare where Pickford ranks in the pantheon of great Everton goalkeepers, like Ted Sager, Gordon West, and of course, Neville Southall. Elton's storytelling and insight are second to none, and both are on full display in his autobiography, Game for a Laugh. With Christmas creeping up on us, it's a brilliant gift for any sports fan, especially those who love the stories behind the golden age of sports broadcasting. I'll leave a link to the book in the description, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Elton, it's great to have you back on the podcast. We last spoke in August about your brilliant book, Game for a Laugh, which was a real insight into your career during a golden age for sports broadcasting. This time, as promised, we're turning our attention to Everton Football Club. And there's been plenty of talk about both on and off the pitch since we last caught up. And I couldn't think of anyone better to unpack it all with than you. And this October international break felt like the right time to review the first quarter of the season, if you like. But before that, I wanted to ask you about a significant day in the history of Everton Football Club that you were very much a part of. And that is the open top bus parade celebrating Everton winning their 4th FA Cup in May 1984. Having spoken to many of the players in that side, they often refer to that victory against Watford at Wembley as the watershed moment under Howard Kendall. You were on the bus covering the event for ITV Granada, and something you said to Peter Reid stuck with me, and that was, I've been covering events like these on Merseyside for 12 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Describe to me your moments and memories of that day, the atmosphere, and what it meant to you to look out at those scenes.
Well, hi again. To start with, it was just a sea of blue below us, on the team, on the bus, the open top bus. I remember interviewing Reedy, as you rightly say, Andy Gray, Howard, probably one or two more, and they were totally overwhelmed by it. And I don't think they expected it. But, having said that, the last time Everton won anything before then was 1970. Now, you compare that to today, it's 30 years since we won anything. So if, miraculously we were to say win the FA Cup again this season, I think the scenes will be even better than they were back in 84. But they were marvellous scenes, don't get me wrong. But I've just got the feeling the wait for Evertonians has been so long now, 30 years, crikey. Who'd have thought it, back in 95 when we won the Cup, that we'd have to wait 30 plus years to enjoy that kind of glory again.
Yeah, and as you rightly say, another line that stuck with me was from Andy Gray, who said, scenes like these, why did we wait 14 years to win something? But just in terms of the day itself, in terms of your preparation, anything you did beforehand, any standout memories, is there anything that comes to mind?
I wouldn't have had to prepare as such. It was a case of getting on the bus, and it was all so obvious. The questioning, for example, was so obvious. And to be honest with you, the lads had all had a couple as well. So there was no point in asking any probing questions. It was just kind of, what do you think of this? It was very, very informal, but no preparation whatsoever. Didn't need it.
No. The Everton today, of course, have most recently beat the current FA Cup holders, Crystal Palace, ending their club record 19-game unbeaten run. In the league, they've played 7, won 3, drawn 2 and lost 2. They're in 8th place, which is 8 places better off, I believe, than they were at this stage last season. At the time of our last podcast, I don't think Everton had yet signed Kieran Dewsbury-Hall or Jack Grealish on loan, who have both made a significant impact to Everton's attacking output alongside Iliman and Jai. There are plenty of talking points and many ways that we could approach this about Everton's current form, but I just want to give you a very open question. What have you made of Everton's start to the season?
Very, very promising. There are one or two things that we'll touch on that I'm not pleased with. But I think the new signings, Grealish in particular, I'm not just getting on the Jack Grealish bandwagon here, but he seems to have transformed the place. From what I don't know, because we weren't there. We haven't been there for so many years. But he really seems to have transformed the atmosphere. He's given the supporters a belief that not only we can win a few games, but we can win them in style. The Everton way. Going back to the team of the 70s who played with a real flourish. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm seeing at the moment. We missed Kieran Dewsbury-Hall in the first half against Palace, because he's great in transition. He will be the guy who crosses the halfway line with the ball and then pass it left or right, which it has to be because we haven't got a number 9 who can control the ball. One of the nitpicks I've got. Mm-hmm. But Grealish has been absolutely terrific. I mean, he's the most fouled player in the Premier League. I don't know whether everybody knows that, but he is the most fouled player in the Premier League, as well as being joint top in assists. So he has been absolutely crucial to what we're doing and the way we're playing.
Yeah, joint top in goal contributions overall, I believe, alongside Mohamed Kudus of Tottenham, 4 assists, 1 goal. And as you say, going forward in transition, there's a fluidity about Everton which you wouldn't have previously associated with them, which is
haven't seen it for years, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Haven't seen this type of football for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's at the top end of the pitch. I think a real interesting talking point is the defensive side of things. Obviously, as similar to previous seasons gone by, Jared Branthwaite has been injured at the start of the season, requiring David Moyes to shift things about and take a different approach at the back. Michael Keane has come in and hasn't put a foot wrong. I think he's been one of the standout players for Everton.
I just to interrupt you briefly, once Jared Branthwaite is fit, he will play. Make no mistake about that. So I see the back two as being Keane and Branthwaite, because as you say, Keane has not put a foot wrong this season. Scored a vital goal for us as well. But also, I mean, what has he done wrong? He might have had the odd misplaced pass or something, but in the main, he has been the rock in the back four.
Yeah, a very interesting point that got raised to me, Elton, by a mate was that in comparison to when Jared Branthwaite plays, Michael Keane has a tendency to play a long ball, which, as you mentioned about the dilemma that David Moyes has at centre forward, the strikers tend to be quite isolated and unable to make use or trap or bring others into play off the long balls. However, when Jared Branthwaite plays, he's more likely to keep the ball on the floor, play through the thirds, and the team push further up the pitch as a unit, as opposed to maybe when Michael Keane plays. I thought that was kind of evident in the performance against Crystal Palace when Michael Keane did go off, despite not, as you say, putting a foot wrong. So I think that's another interesting point to touch on. But you'd drop James Tarkowski, would you?
Well, I'd have to. It's a case of Branthwaite will play, so it's a case. Well, who does he play alongside? It's a choice of either Keane or Tarkowski, and from what I've seen so far this season, I would say go with Keane.
Mm-hmm. And Jake O'Brien is a very interesting player at the present moment in time because, as we know, since coming into the side, he's made an excellent utility right back up and down the pitch. However, another standout performer has been James Garner, who I think there is a case to be made. He maybe performs better at right fullback than he does with Dan in the middle of the pitch.
I've heard that a lot. I actually think that Jake O'Brien, a bit like Michael Keane, he's done nothing wrong. I think why a lot of fans don't really see him as a long term right back, excuse me, is because he's not built like a right back. He's built like a centre half.
Mm-hmm.
He's like Dan Burn at Newcastle. He's huge. But I think he's done okay. There was a lot of talk in the build up to the season that we desperately needed a right back. I don't think that's as crucial now as we thought it might be, because I think Jacob Brown's done a decent job there.
Mm-hmm.
The other fullback position, Mikalenko, every time I think, crikey, we really need another left back, he seems to do okay. He's not an outstanding left back. He's not Raymond Wilson, believe me, or a Pat Van Den Hauwe.
Or Leighton Baines.
Or most recently, Leighton Baines. But every now and again, he seems to do well. Not my favourite, put it that way. I think we could improve on that, but not urgently. Because he does seem to, come to the fore when needed.
And particularly, he steps up against the elite right wingers in the Premier League too.
Yes, he does. For example, he's always had Salah in his back pocket. James Garner, that was your point. James Garner, I think if you take Grealish out of the mix just for a moment, James Garner's not far off being our player of the season so far. I think he's been excellent. So I wouldn't move him, to be honest with you. I'd leave him where he is for now. But I do take your point that if needed, if something were to happen to Jake O'Brien, it seems that, Seamus's days are very much numbered, sadly. He's just too old. Although he played for the Republic, didn't he, this week?
And done exceptionally well.
Yeah, apparently so. But it seems to me that, Moisey sees him, I don't know. I almost said a charity case there, but that is not the case at all. But I just don't think David now trusts him to last, as our right back. But like I say, I think James Garner has been absolutely terrific in midfield, a revelation, in fact. I'd leave him where he is. I really would.
Yeah. Most definitely. I'm sure a lot of Evertonians feel the same. Now, I know you said there's a few bones you'd like to pick with Everton so far this season. And looking back,
yes.
I think, out of the League Cup at the first hurdle against
Well, I'm gonna interrupt you there if you don't mind, because that is my main bugbear. I've not forgiven David Moyes for that yet. If we win the FA Cup, I might do. But we've waited 30 years to win something, to go to Wembley and, and to experience that wonderful feeling of being at Wembley and then hopefully lifting a cup. I thought his team selection to start against Wolves was awful.
Heavily rotated squad. Heavily rotated team.
There was no need. It was like rest key players, i.e. Grealish or what have you. We didn't play again for 6 days. Why rest players who are going to have a rest anyway? It was pointless. I don't think he'd switched on to the fact that our supporters, probably you and I included, would love a cup run that would take us to Wembley. And I think he misjudged, the overall opinion and feeling of the fans on that occasion. I found it still sticks in my craw that he did that, and we went out at Wolves with a whimper.
Especially when you take into, if you take a step back, you consider that we'd beaten Wolves Everton had beaten Wolves the weekend prior, and that week in general, because Everton played Liverpool at Anfield, following weekend, and that the first half performance was reminiscent of, you know, a previous David Moyes side uh, at Anfield. Now, I am a massive supporter of David Moyes. I wanted David Moyes back at Everton years prior to the appointment actually happening, just for the sake of the identity of the club and rediscovering what Everton Football Club is all about. But if I was to criticize anything about the opening few weeks of Everton's season, and as mentioned, I'm on the same page as you, Elton. I'm largely very happy with how Everton have not only performed but recruited and integrated the new signings. It would have been that week where the first half performance against Wolves was quite stale, gave away silly goals, looked much stronger in the last 20 minutes of the match because the big boys, Jack Grealish, Iliman and Jai, both came on, and we seem to have pinned Wolves back in and around their 18-yard box.
If we'd have had a proper number 9, we probably would have got away with something there.
Yeah,
but we haven't, and that's probably the major issue regarding the team at the moment. Is who do you play up front? Is it Beto or is it Barry? And at the moment, I'm just slightly swinging towards Beto, and I don't know why. I don't know why we bought Barry, and that's a fact, because basically you're buying another Beto, and no one's convinced about Beto, so why buy another one? And also spend, £27 million, which is big money for Everton. And so I just, if you think about it, against Palace at half-time, nearly £70 million worth of talent, just a roundabout ballpark figure, £70 million worth of talent, Barry and Dibbling, were brought off at half-time, and it was nothing to do with injuries. So that's basically our transfer budget in the summer, which by taking them off, Moyes was saying that they're just not good enough at the moment. But so we come down to the big question: well, who do we play at number 9? Now, I would actually play Alvarez there as a false 9, playing in the way, for those who are old enough to remember, the way Kenny Dalglish used to play: back to goal, pick the pass for the oncoming players, i.e. Nadai, Dewsbury Hall, Grealish, obviously, and to a lesser extent, James Garner, and play like that. Now, I don't know whether that's occurred to Moyes, whether it's an admission that, the 2 players that we bought for a total of roughly 45 to 50 million pounds just aren't good enough. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on Barry there because he's young. And, we've got to give him time. That's fine. But in the meantime, that there needs to be someone who can fill that gap. And basically, we haven't got anybody unless we kind of try to adapt Alvarez into that kind of position. I've heard it said play Ndai there. Personally, I don't think that will work because Ndai is a ball carrier. So I think where he is, I've been terribly impressed with him, by the way. Very, very impressed with Ndai. And Grealish doing what he did. We've got, for the first time, I can't remember, we've got ball carriers of quality. Now, they're running and taking the ball into positions which are dangerous if you had someone who could capitalize on that, but we haven't.
That's a very interesting shout, to try Charlie Alcaraz out as a false 9, but to David Moyes' credit, after a poor first half performance against Crystal Palace, which I know he called it that in the post-match press conference, the substitutions that he made all the difference.
Yeah, and
Chief among them, Charlie Alcaraz. He was exceptional.
Yeah. Alcaraz was terrific in the second half. In fact, he was doing what Dewsbury Hall was doing in games prior to that. I thought he was very, very good. Um, and it made me think about this business of playing Alcaraz, as the false nine. But, he's a skillful player. He's got good ball control. I'm thinking, well, just maybe he could adjust a little bit and play in that position where he's bringing other players into the game. Um, he's got a football brain too. I've noticed that. So, he would know which balls to play once he got it when he was up front, i.e., with his back to goal. He'd have a pretty good idea of what to do. Listen, it's clutching at straws because
Mhm.
at the moment, we're playing Beto, Barry, Beto. They're just the same. And they don't hold the ball well. I'm not criticizing, certainly in Beto's case, his work rate. I would think centre halves hate playing against Beto because he runs, he's leggy, he's awkward. We can't control the ball, and that's what you need from your number nine.
Yeah, the control is definitely an issue that's been raised, and it's also, as you mentioned, it's the bringing the others into the play, especially if a long ball's been played up to you. You need to assert your physical presence. You need to win your headers. You need to hold the ball up, which hasn't
And there'll be
really.
no short. Once you do that, there'll be no shortage of options
Mhm.
because you'll have Nadai wanting the ball, Grealish wanting the ball, Garner wanting the ball, Dewsbury Hall wanting the ball. You know, it's an embarrassment of riches coming at you while you're holding the ball, um, and working out who to play in. Of those who are sort of on rushing.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. You talk about um, that sort of attack and fluidity that we've got, and one of the leading lights of that is Illiman and Jai. To tie this into something maybe a little bit more personal, it's coming up to 5 years since my dad passed away, and I think about him every day, but naturally with the anniversary coming up, you tend to think about him more and more. And one of the things that's on my mind mostly is I just think he would have absolutely loved to watch Illiman and Dye play because he loved wide players that made things happen. He told me about Dave Thomas in the 70s. He loved
Mm.
Andrei Kanchelskis in the 90s. I was wondering, is there any particular mold of player or position that you like the most, Elton?
Gosh. Uh, no, I don't think there is, as such. If you had to say, is there one position on the field that I really enjoy seeing a player? Um, no, I just think all round ability is the key for me. Um, if if the right winger is playing a blinder, great. If the left wing is playing, if centre midfield is making runs, um, or a number 10 threading balls inside a fullback, I couldn't differentiate between any of those things. I
Hmm.
mean, I've always loved a number nine, you know, and maybe that's why I've got this bee in my bonnet about Beto and Barry
Hmm.
because they don't fit into the same category as some of the great number nine. And before you say it, no, I did not see Dixie, but the first centre forward I saw was Alex Young. Um, he wasn't like a centre forward in the traditional sense. Following that there was Joe Royle. There are one or two that I wouldn't mention in the same breath as these guys, but then you've got Sharp, Gray, you know.
Latchford.
Um, Latchford, yes, of course. Oh, terrific. So unfortunate not to have won anything with us.
Hmm.
Um, but after that, Romelu Lukaku used to enjoy watching Big Rom. Um, but I wouldn't say I look at a position and think, um, is he doing what I really want him to do in that particular position? No, I wouldn't go that far.
Hmm. No, that's interesting to hear. And I agree with you. Evertonians in general do tend to have a fondness for their centre forwards, don't they? And when the centre forwards aren't delivering, there always generally tends to be a question mark on their name if the team
Oh,
aren't performing as well.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, generally, I often tend to view international breaks as a time to give my eyes a bit of a rest from watching so much football, but I have stuck the odd game on in the background, as we talked about before. I know Seamus Coleman's been getting praised for his performances for Ireland, and they got a great win against Armenia the other night, and they were desperately unlucky to hear that Hungary got a late equaliser against Portugal, which makes their qualifying efforts slimmer. And England have looked exceptionally strong under Thomas Tuchel, winning his sixth first World Cup qualifiers without conceding a goal. A huge reason for that is the man in between the sticks, Jordan Pickford, who became the first England goalkeeper to keep 9 consecutive clean sheets. Now, people like us who watch Jordan Pickford on a regular basis at club level know what he's capable of. He's very much a leader at the back and often pulls off saves that he has no right to make. Where I wanted to take this is Everton are a club with a rich history of tremendous goalkeepers. The best of those I consider to be Ted Sager, a multiple-time league champion and an FA Cup winner with around 24 years at the club. Gordon West, again, a multiple-time league champion and an FA Cup winner with over 400 appearances. And then, of course, Neville Southall, who won 8 trophies at the club and was considered the best in the world in his prime. Everton, as you say, Elton, haven't lifted silverware since Neville Southall was in goal in 1995. And the club's general performance mean that Pickford doesn't boast the same sort of CV as those I've just talked about. But he's made more appearances for England than any other Everton player. And only Alisson Becker of Liverpool and Ederson, formerly of Man City, have kept more clean sheets since Pickford's debut in 2017, which is astonishing when you consider some of the seasons that Everton have been through. There's certainly a case to be made that Everton wouldn't be a Premier League club if not for the man from Sunderland. For a generation of Evertonians, he's the best goalkeeper that we've ever seen. So what are your thoughts on him and where does he stack up compared to those greats?
I would put him joint second, behind Big Nev, joint second with Gordon West. I think he's the difference between us playing in the Premier League or in the Championship. I think he's been absolutely outstanding. I'm delighted that he's signing a new contract. That means we've got a very, very safe pair of hands at the back. I read quite recent, last couple of days actually, that people were talking about him and saying, well, he's liable to make the occasional mistake. Everyone in life makes mistakes, but I had a look, and Jordan Pickford has been directly responsible for 2 goals in the last 3 seasons. Now that's pretty good from a goalkeeper. In fact, I go so far as to say excellent. In other words, he's made 2 contributions which went awry and ended up with the opposition scoring twice in 3 seasons. That makes him ultra reliable. And as you rightly say, he does make some saves that he's almost got no right to. And he's signing for us for another 4 years. Good on him. Good on him. Because even though we never hear Jordan Pickford being linked in the summer or January with another club, we never hear of that, which amazes me, delights me, but amazes me. I mean, Manchester United, surely, they're crying out for a keeper ever since De Gea. And they just seem to be overlooking the obvious. Hey, don't get me wrong. I hope Sir Jim Ratcliffe and his mates don't watch this and think, oh, hello. Why didn't we go for Pickford? No, he's been outstanding. As I say, no one could eclipse Big Nev, mainly because of what we won with him. and likewise, in a sense, with Gordon West, 2 championships and FA Cup. So to put Jordan alongside Gordon West as our best number one after Neville Southall is a major tribute because, Jordan Pickford hasn't won anything with us.
Yeah, that's very much my opinion too, and I'm glad you share that. Do you think the scrutiny that surrounds Jordan Pickford is just primarily down to being England's number one and
Well, as I
the
say,
exposure
I
that
mean,
that
I've
gives?
heard these sort of criticisms, scrutiny, as you put it. He's made 2 mistakes in 3 seasons that have led to goals. And what's there to scrutinise?
Yeah, I can understand that. I think one of the things that people often point to, and this is just me playing devil's advocate because I'm the biggest fan of Jordan Pickford, is his temperament. Because many times I think people often would like their goalkeepers to be level headed, calm under pressure, relaxed.
You don't get that with goalkeepers.
No.
It's long been said to be a goalkeeper, you need to be a little bit mad. But also, you've got to understand that when Pickford gets irate and he starts shouting and bawling and doing odd things, that's his way of getting himself up, psyched up, if you like. It's not unusual for a goalkeeper to behave like that, because they are, if you like, they're 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 a one-man team in themselves, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
You've got 10 outfield players and the goalkeeper, which is a specialist position. It's the only real specialist position in football when you think about it. I mean, it's the only bloke who can handle the ball. I just think Jordan Pickford, as a character, is top class. As a goalkeeper, the same. As I say, he doesn't. A lot of people, level. Oh, he's always liable to make a mistake. Well, that fact I've just given you.
Yeah.
He's made 2 mistakes that have resulted in goals in the past 3 seasons. I think we're lucky to have him. I really do. In fact, when you think of how good he is and how poor we've been up until the start of this season, it's quite remarkable that someone hasn't come in and bought him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would, I would agree with that. And in terms of the leadership group at Everton Football Club, I'd only rarely put Seamus Coleman above Jordan Pickford in that respect, in terms of how Jordan Pickford has matured in his time at Everton Football Club, has shouldered responsibility in his time at the club during rarely heavy duty and perilous times. I think he's been exceptional as a leader at the back. And I guess it's not commonplace to give your goalkeeper the captain's armband, is it? So I would argue that's maybe why Tarkovsky is the captain when Seamus Coleman isn't playing.
Well, a lot of managers do believe that you want your captain to be in the thick of it on the pitch, whereas a goalkeeper for periods of time, probably 70, 80 yards away from the play, and that's why, in terms of his character and the respect that the other players have for him. I would agree with you. I think he'd be a natural. There've been some great international goalkeepers who were captains. Dino Zoff, for example, who captained the side. I can't think of any in this country notable goalkeeper captains. Maybe someone could jog my memory on that. But it doesn't surprise me that, in fact, if not being captain enables him to play the way he does and also influence the back four the way that he does, I would say we'll leave it alone.
Yeah, yeah, and long may it continue what he's doing with the
Very much so.
potential new contract on the way.
I will
Now,
say that in maybe 4 5 years' time, it wouldn't surprise me if he goes on a sentimental journey and plays again for Sunderland. But that's in maybe 5, even 6 years' time.
mm-hmm.
Maybe he would just want to close his career with a final season. in a sort of Asmir Begovic way,
Mhm.
as a number two to an established first team goalkeeper, just to be part of that Sunderland scene, because he genuinely loves Sunderland,
Yeah,
but he genuinely loves Everton too.
yeah. And by the way things are going at Sunderland, Robin Roofs is a fantastic goalkeeper. Um, but hopefully that's in years to come. Someone I
Oh,
wanted to
I'd say that maybe 6 years away.
hmm yeah, someone I wanted to talk to you about Elton is because it's someone that you mentioned to me when we were organising the podcast is David Moyes. Um, as mentioned previously, I am delighted that David Moyes is back at the club. First and foremost, because I think he has restored the identity of Everton Football Club that not just Evertonians were crying out for, but the identity and the feel that the wider football community associated with Everton Football Club, that they just look more like themselves and have a determination and a, dare I say it, steel about them.
Yeah,
Yes, of course, he can come under scrutiny sometimes. Mainly, he didn't have a great record away at what you'd call the big six teams. And Everton, unfortunately, fell, come up short against Liverpool at Anfield. Poor first half performance, give them too much respect, but really came back into the game in the second half. And we're unlucky maybe not to get something from it. And I think particularly the the defeat against Liverpool, and I may even say the draw against West Ham can be looked at as missed opportunities, given the form that both Liverpool and West Ham have shown post those games. So, what are your thoughts on David Moyes now in his first full season back at the club?
I think he gets the fans. I think he relates to the fans and what the fans want. Although he got it totally wrong in the cup game at Wolves, absolutely, you know, he got it wrong. And I think if you were to pressurise him privately, he might admit that because the fans were disgusted at what happened at Molineux. Um, the fans want a cup run. And we're thinking about things like that now because, one thing he has done, he's rid any talk of relegation. There's absolutely no way that we're going to be involved in the kind of troubles that we've been over the past 5 years. So give him credit for that. Um, I've said, and I think I've said it to you before, he is also our head of recruitment. Every player that we sign, I mean, I don't think that was the case with Deitch, Lampard. I'm not even going to mention the RB name. Um, so he will have okayed Barry, Dibbling, Dewsbury Hall, the newcomers. So I'm wondering a little bit about his own recruitment ideals because Barry, from what we've seen, is no improvement on Beto.
Mm.
And Dibbling, now this really is open for debate because Dibbling is what is he, 18, 19? He's a kid. And we've paid what will possibly amount to £45 million for him. I noticed prior to the game against Palace when he started that there was a close-up of him on TV right at the start. And he just looked overawed. He looked almost frightened. And I wonder whether, getting back to your point about David Moyes, whether Moyes knew that he would have to be brought along very tenderly because he doesn't somehow look ready for the battle yet. So it's a big shout by Moyes to say, yes, we'll pay pretty much what Southampton wanted for him, which will amount to about 45 million quid. But Moisey thinking, I believe he is going to be a great player for Everton Football Club, in the years to come. Maybe not the months, the years to come. So it'll be very interesting to see whether he's proved right on that.
Yeah, Tyler Diblin's development will be an interesting case to watch because he's highly, highly rated by many of those coaches that have dealt with him in his young
Yeah,
career so far.
absolutely. I'm not knocking the kid at all. I mean, he's a kid. You're bringing what's is he 18 or 19?
19, I
One of
think.
the two. 19. You're bringing in 19-year-old from the South Coast up to Liverpool. And I don't know who's looking after him. I've no idea where he lives. But all these things are vitally important that the kid feels at home.
Mhm.
I don't know. Maybe even move his buy his mum and dad a house, and live with them. I've no idea, but that's not the most ludicrous suggestion I've ever heard. Um, so it's a. But when you're a club like Everton, which clearly has not got a load of money, like Liverpool, as Moisey said, they spent more on one player than we have done on our entire squad.
Mhm.
Um, but when you are relatively short of cash and, you know, sort of 70, 80 million is a lot of money to our ownership, then to buy Beto Mark II and a kid who is clearly not quite ready for the best part of 70 million quid, it's a very brave shout by whoever's going to own up and say, yeah, that they were my idea. No one's done that, funnily enough, have they?
I can understand that. And also, I think the scrutiny levels on, I think at Everton Football Club, as said, the scrutiny on the number 9 is always quite high. But Dibbling in particular is only amplified by the high performance levels of Illiman and Jai, of Jack Grealish and the others in his position, really.
Yeah, well, it makes you wonder at the moment, even if he was, full of confidence and performing at a higher level than he has been, where would he fit in? Because I wouldn't. The overall balance of that team with Nadai out wide and Grealish out wide. I mean, from what I've seen I did see him play for Southampton. Um, I can't see where else he'd play other than that outside right berth, possibly outside left berth. Certainly nowhere near ready to play more inside in a sort of akin to a number 10 role.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's just a case of watch this space, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, yeah. Two more questions relating to David Moyes that I'd be really interested to hear your opinion on. Elton is
Mm-hmm.
his treatment of Jack Grealish, because Jack Grealish is the first to say how Moyes' approach to handling him, his management style, the arm around the shoulder, the go and show us what you can do approach has really brought the best out of Jack Grealish. I think obviously coming out of, I don't want to call it a rigid system, because in my time of watching football, Pep Guardiola is only really rivaled by Sir Alex Ferguson in terms of his achievements and how he's changed football as a whole. But to come out of maybe a more rigid tactical system of what's expected to you to more of a free role, uh, which is, obviously showing in the impact that he's having at Everton. So do you think that David Moyes would have had the same approach with Jack Grealish, say years prior when David Moyes was first at Everton, for example?
Well, let's put it another way. If we were the club who had signed Jack Grealish from Aston Villa, where he played without any restrictions at all, I'm sure David Moyes would have said, "You just keep on doing what you used to do for Villa. That'll
Mhm.
suit us." And I think that's what he's told Jack Grealish since Jack's been with us. Play the way you did at Aston Villa, where once again he was the most foul player in the Premier League. Um, it was almost a one-man show for Villa. I mean, he was absolutely terrific, head and shoulders above anybody else, which obviously led to his £100 million move to Man City. And I'm sure if he's spoken, I'm sure he will have done, because I know a good friend of mine, Andy Gray, spoke to Jack Grealish's dad, I'm sure Mr. Grealish Senior would have explained the way his son likes to be managed.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Makes sense.
Mm.
And another question in relation to David Moyes, because as we've discussed previously on this podcast, Elton, you've had a media career to die for in terms of some of the names that you've dealt with on a regular basis,
Mhm.
some of the interviews that you've had. And one of the more interesting parts about David Moyes' return to Everton, I feel anyway, is his approach to media now and his more relaxed temperament almost. So, from a media perspective, how have you found David Moyes being back at Everton?
I think that the press will be delighted that he's there. He's very open. Um, I think if on occasions you get him on a one-to-one basis and say before or after, maybe ask him a question you wouldn't think was suited to the actual interview itself, he'd probably give you an answer or a nod or a wink. Um, the sort of where a lot of political journalists will say to an MP or a member of the government, listen, this is off the record. Would I be okay in saying such and such? And, the MP, member of parliament, government or whatever would just say, no, you'd be okay. In other words, you don't attribute that quote to anybody, but you're on pretty solid ground by using it.
Mhm.
And I think David, um, I think David would actually respond to those sort of questions in a positive way. I think he would give the journalist um, a hint that the journalist was on the right track or otherwise,
Mhm.
and journalists do really like that, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I have found it fascinating. I've always liked David Moyes as a character. I've met him on several occasions, and he always couldn't have been nicer to me. And I've always had a nice exchange with him. So to see him back at the football club now, and touch wood, things seem to be not necessarily going Everton's way, but there's marked improvement from
Listen,
seasons prior.
we're eighth, aren't we?
Mhm.
Eighth. I think we could be 4 points better off than we are,
Mhm.
which would take us up to something like third, and quite rightly so. I mean, the two home draws, they should have been both wins.
Mhm. Emmy Martinez for Aston Villa was in inspired form that afternoon, and it was quite
Oh,
frustrating watching in the stands, seeing him
he
missing.
really was. He was terrific.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you, and I see your point, mate. And as mentioned, long may this run of form continue, because David Moyes is saying openly in interviews that he'd like to transform Everton's form into European form now, which they certainly did end last season on.
I think we're also going to get stronger at the back with Branthwaite's return, whenever that is. I don't think it'll be in time for Saturday, will it? From
I
what
don't
I
think so.
gather, I'd be surprised if he were fit enough to play on Saturday, which will be very interesting because Jack Grealish cannot play on Saturday. Um, it'll be very interesting to see who he brings in and what he does, how he works that. Does he play instead of Grealish? Does he play another defensive player? Maybe Irabunum, in alongside Idrissa and James Garner. It's
Hmm.
very interesting to see how he works that one out.
Yeah, most definitely, and just the options that are available
Because
to them
Jack
now.
Grealish, let's face it, is absolutely crucial to the way we're playing. Now, we haven't got him on Saturday, so we're going to have to come up with something different.
Yes, they are, and it'll most definitely be an interesting watch, and I'm looking forward to the
Mm-hmm.
game. Um, on that note of strong managerial personalities, I the other night stuck on The Damned United. I don't know if you've seen it, Elton.
Oh, I've seen it more than once.
Which is all about Brian Clough, a man who features heavily in your book, about his time at Derby County, the fallout, and his eventual 44-day stint at Leeds. I believe it was 44 days anyway. Um, the film leans heavily on his relationship with Peter Taylor as his number two, which I found really interesting to watch. Um, More broadly, how highly do you regard Brian Clough, and more in line with the film, for those that haven't seen it, how influential was Taylor to his success, and was it as much as the film makes out?
Well, one of Peter Taylor's great strengths was that he was very good at spotting a player, and how they would benefit in the first place Derby County, secondly Nottingham Forest. For example, Cloughie was absolutely horrified. That's maybe too strong a word. When Peter Taylor said we should sign Dave Mackay from Tottenham, Cloughie just thought he was over the hill. But of course, Mackay turned out to be a terrific signing. It was Peter Taylor who spotted Roy McFarland at Tranmere. I could go on and on. Peter Taylor had an eye for a player, and Cloughie respected that. If Peter Taylor said we should buy him for this particular position or for this reason, then Cloughie will go along with it. But in terms of the way that Forest played, that was primarily down to Cloughie.
Right.
Cloughie believed Cloughie believed that the football should be played on the floor, not in the air. And his teams went out and did that. And also, Nottingham Forest players didn't get sent off, or very, very rarely got booked, because Cloughie wouldn't stand for it. Now, Cloughie ruled with a fear factor. No one wanted to cross Brian Clough, not because they get a right hook or anything like that. It's just that he had that kind of personality you didn't want to cross. And I know that because I had a boss who was very similar to that. To be in his good books was everything. And that actually gave you confidence. And I'm sure that Nottingham Forest players that maybe Cloughie had said after a game before, said something like, "Hey, well done, son." You know, thinking, oh, bloody hell, I've been praised by the boss. Brilliant. Mm-hmm. You know? So, no, Cloughie was an absolute genius. I mean, to do what he did at Forest, I mean, okay, won the title at Derby, possibly would have won it again, but for the fallout with Sam Longson. But what he achieved in Nottingham Forest was nothing short of spectacular. It will never, ever happen again.
No.
To go and take a club out of the second division, or let's bring it to modern day, take a club out of the Championship into the Premier League, win the title, and then win the European Cup or the Champions League. That will never, ever happen again. And I have no fear of contradiction here. Or someone saying, well, you said on Max's podcast, you know, back in mid-October 2025, that no one would ever do what Brian Clough did at Nottingham Forest. And they did. That will not happen. No.
What do you think, because on that note of competitive balance, what do you think he would make of how football is domestically in England today?
He'd hate it. He would actually hate it. He'd get on with it, but he'd hate it.
Interesting.
Yeah, because he I mean, for example, he never had to worry about PSR or you know, FFP, whatever you want to call it. He didn't have to worry about that. You know, that's the other thing. He used to buy, for Derby anyway, he'd buy a player or agree that they'd pay so much, and the chairman had no idea. Yeah. I think that was the case with Colin Todd and certainly John McGovern, that Cloughie had done all the details with the selling clubs, and then sort of told the chairman in passing. I think that was reflected a little bit in in the damn United. But that did happen.
Interesting, interesting, and obviously naturally, just because I think the way I'm wired, um, once I lock on to someone and get a bit of a fascination, I'll go down rabbit holes of like YouTube videos and books and things like that. And I found a fantastic interview. I can't remember who it was with. It might have been with Brian Moore, where he's talking about when he was interviewed for the England job.
Mm.
Um, and he said, whilst waiting to go in to be spoken to, he was looking at the pictures on the wall. And England at that time was sponsored by Admiral. And as opposed to having a more traditional all white strip, they kind of had a blue and red top half.
Yeah, there's
Uh,
like a panel here, wasn't it?
yeah, and he went in to the interview and they asked, so what would you change? And he said, the first thing I'd do is I'd get rid of that bloody kit. It's awful. But
Well, and he'd believe it.
mm, yeah,
He'd
but
believe it.
yeah, from a media perspective, I know you hold him in high regard and you're very fond of him. Um, was that relationship something that had to be earned and built over a period of time? And was that respect mutual?
What between whom?
You and Cluffy?
Oh, well, I'll tell you how it started. I was doing a midweek sports special out of the Thames Studios in London, and Brian Moore was presenting, and Brian Clough was studio guest, and all I was doing was the news of the day. And I finished the news segment by saying, and Nigel Clough of Nottingham Forest will miss the game against whoever it was on Saturday, as he's got chicken pox. And that's one reason I'm sat over here and Brian is over there. Cluffy loved it. He roared laughing. And he was giving me the thumbs up across the studio, And that's when, if you like, if you want to call it a bond, was formed. But I was lucky; it must be the only guy on television, apart from Brian Moore, never had a crossword with Cluffy. No, never. I came away totally unscathed from all our encounters, and there were many.
Mm-hmm. Are you in the camp of he's the greatest manager England never had?
Oh, without a doubt. Oh, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Although how he would have gone about it. I mean, that thing about the strip, classic Cluffy. Um, how he would have gone about it. I mean, the FA back then, and to a lesser extent today, that they want a certain dignity about the manager of England. It's almost like they've got to have a political presence as well. Now Cluffy would have said exactly what he thought of the FA, of a country that we were playing. If he thought it was a country that didn't exactly specialize in human rights, he would say so. So it would have been fascinating to see how he got on, how he managed England. I'm sure he would have been far more successful than say Sir Ron Greenwood was
Mm-hmm.
at the time.
Yeah. And interestingly, on that point, that honesty, the bluntness, the saying things how it is, do you attribute some of that as to why it didn't work out at Leeds?
No, I think the reason it didn't work for Cluffy at Leeds is that the players stayed the same
Hmm.
as under Revie, and the players absolutely idolised Don Revie. And of course, Cluffy hated Revie for a variety of reasons, and he said as such when he went in and met the Leeds players as their manager for the first time. And he said that. And he also did say about, take all your medals and this and chuck them in the bin because you've earned it. You haven't earned them properly. You've earned them by cheating. He said all that. Now, to players like Giles, in particular, Johnny Giles, to say that to players like that who'd actually idolised the previous manager, it was not going to get you off to a good start. In fact, if anyone who knew Cloughie and knew the way the Leeds players were told about that at the time, not in retrospect, at the time, you said he won't be there long.
Yeah, fair point. Fair point. A clash of personalities, maybe fair to put it down to that.
In the case of Giles and Clough, absolutely. But there would be others as well, who they weren't shy, the Leeds players back then. The likes of Alan Clark, Gordon McQueen, they weren't shy. They weren't shy people. No. They just wouldn't have liked the Brian Clough approach. Whereas the Derby stroke Forest players, they will say, Martin O'Neill, for example, will tell you, if he was here now, he would tell you that he absolutely hated Brian Clough. But, boy, he wanted to play for him. That's a contradiction in terms, isn't it?
Yeah.
I remember having George Best as a studio guest, and we were doing a game. It was a Nottingham Forest game. Might have been against Liverpool. I can't remember. And George Best was in. I got round to the obvious question. Well, what do you make of Brian Clough, George? And he said, I love the way his teams play football, but I'm not sure I'd like him as a person. And that was his answer on national television. So Clough divided opinion.
Mm-hmm. For anybody wanting to get a sense of the magnitude of his achievements at Nottingham Forest, I'd encourage people to go and watch the I Believe in Miracles documentary. It's a fantastic insight.
Anything about Clough is worth watching. It's I don't know. You would never. I mean, I was doing a thing for the book, a little promo for the book yesterday, and had so many characters. This is on Twitter, so I could only use so many characters. So I was going to say, never before, never heard of stories regarding football's great personalities. But I thought, well, I've only got room for two, so I said the likes of Bill Shankly and Brian Clough. Because they are the two biggest characters I met in football.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can understand, obviously, from the stories that you've told me and by the nature of being from Merseyside, I can understand why Shankly was a character that transcended the sport. And from what you're telling me, I can piece together why Clough transcended the sport in that respect. But was there anything else in particular that gave him that appeal that transcended football?
No, you just said it. I mean, their characters, their personalities were such that because they were in the public eye as football managers, then their personalities came out more so than most.
Yeah, would Clough
people in most walks of life?
Would Clough often talk about things unrelated to football with a live microphone?
God, yeah. Oh yeah. He was a very keen socialist, a champagne socialist, basically. Although he would never use the term champagne socialist, but he very much believed in the socialist ideal. And Shanks was the same. Shankly, in 1974, when I joined Radio City, Terry Smith, the MD, had this idea that Bill Shankly, no longer manager at Liverpool, of course, should do a chat show for Radio City, which he did. And the first guest and it was round about the last week in October 1974 or the first week in November 74, was Harold Wilson, who was Prime Minister at the time. And Shankly talked to him about politics, of course, some football, but all sorts of things for an hour with the Prime Minister. I mean, that showed, the depth of his knowledge on things other than football.
Yeah, most definitely. And as you've explained, those people within the sport that are outspoken about those sorts of issues are not only interesting, but I think vitally important to the sport as a whole and its development as the world changes, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Elton, it's been an absolute pleasure to have your company as always, mate. Is there anything else
Thank you, Max.
that you want to go into, or anything else you want to talk about?
No. Well, if you want to ask me something else, you fire away. But no, there's nothing else I've got on my. In fact, regarding Everton, I think I've said everything that I feel needs to be said.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cheeky one, just to lash in at the end. I know it's early days, and you know, a permanent transfer or talks of a permanent transfer might be way off. But do you think Jack Grealish could potentially end up being a permanent Everton player at all?
Yes. Very much so. I mean, it might. I've heard it might not cost as much as 50 million, which is the sum. It might be less. But you think what you're buying, apart from a football player, you're buying someone who's had a great influence on the players around him, will have a great influence in the community, and brings a smile to the face of Evertonians. Even at 50 million, he'd be cheap at the price.
Mm-hmm. That's good to hear. Elton, pleasure as always, sir. Thank you for your time.
No problem, Max.